Are you growing tomatoes in your garden this spring? I know we are, and a lot of them. We want to show you a few different ways on how you can care for your tomatoes, especially knowing the differences between the types of tomatoes you have. Hi, my name is Kelly and I'm from Moreton Bay Organics, and welcome to today's video. Before we get into cutting and pruning and staking up our tomatoes and stringing them up, which we'll go through shortly, I want to talk to you about a couple of different varieties of tomatoes, or not varieties, it's actually types of tomatoes that you would be growing in your garden. There are two main types of tomatoes. One is called a determinate tomato. This tomato is something like a Roma tomato or your miniature cherry tomatoes. In saying that, there are many cherry tomatoes that climb, but some varieties are very short. So determinate means they have a set height. That's as far as they go. They're more of a bushy tomato, and they don't go climbing up the hills and far away like some other tomatoes do. So we actually love growing these sorts of tomatoes because they're much easier to maintain. There's still a few things you need to do for them, but they're by far the easiest ones to care for on maintenance and pruning side of things. The other type of tomato that is around is called the indeterminate, meaning that it will sort of have a height that it may grow to, but tends to actually outsee that height and keeps going and going. So things like Garossalisi or your Siberians are definitely a indeterminate, meaning they generally would grow to about 1.8 meters tall, but sometimes they grow taller than that. And we find with the indeterminate tomatoes, we seem to get more heavier fruiting from, because they do keep climbing, so they can set new sprouts for setting fruit. These ones are great for the amount of fruiting that you want, but the downside is it's much more maintenance for them. But in saying that, it's not hard maintenance. It just means you have to keep on top of things for them. So before we get into it, they're the two main types. So determinate, set height, more bushy, and indeterminate, which are much taller, will start climbing and need a little bit more maintenance. So in this garden here, which you can sort of see, it looks like a sea of green. I've got a lot of companion planting going on in here, which I'll show you as we go. But this one right beside me, which is, I'm not a very tall lady, but this is tall. I'm 5'1". So this is an African giant marigold. We've got some flowering that have just started opening within the garden, but we love to use these in companion planting. They're great as a trap crop for aphids in particular, but also they emit a smell that sort of tells bugs to stay away. We're not very tasty. So we use a lot of them throughout our tomato little orchard. We've got borage as well. I don't know that you can see it there, probably not, no, it's a bit too low. But I'll show you that as well. Borage is great for the pollinating, attracting. It's got very furry or lightly prickly surroundings, so it helps deter bugs as well. And the other one we've got is basil. So basil, like making anything with tomatoes, basil go hand in hand together, so we actually use that in the garden with them as well. It just emits a nice aroma to try and keep some bugs away. The main bugs that you'll come across within tomatoes is aphids. The other thing that you'll definitely get in tomatoes, especially in our climate in Australia, in Brisbane, is black spot, which is a fungal infection. So we combat that all the time. So we actually have different plantings of tomatoes around, because once it starts in one area, it can quickly take over if you don't stay on top of it. So it just sort of helps enhance your fruiting reward to sort of stagger them around. So we'll show you how to care for them. In this little patch, these are all indeterminates, so meaning they'll grow much taller. I've got some support frames in at the moment, just while they're this little, of bamboo stakes. That's all I had available at the time, so they're not the strongest, but we generally use tomato stakes, or we set up a string system, which is some spikes, the three-way, you know what I'm talking about, star pickets, that's what I'm trying to think of, the star pickets, and then we put a thing across and string them up, which will show you what we do in the greenhouse. So yes, so with these ones being indeterminate, meaning they keep growing, the way to get the best fruit you possibly can out of them is by trying to keep them to a single stem the whole way up, or letting them to spread out to two. If you let it bush out, it will concentrate on growing more than it will on producing fruit. So by minimizing its energy spent on growing, you try to minimize the amount of plants that is actually there. So you'll get more sets of fruit doing it this way. The other thing is making sure you've got really good aeration and having all these other companion plants around for pollination as well. So let's get to it. I am just going to flip the phone around and we'll start showing you how to care for them. So as you can see here, this is some of our beautiful borage. It's actually edible and medicinal as well, so we like to use it for teas and stuff, floral decorations on finishing salads and that. But here we've got a beautiful money maker tomato. This is only a few weeks old and it's sort of got a little bit out of control because we went away for a week and a bit. So you can see the flowers already on here. There's even fruits setting down below. We normally try and let them get a bit taller before we allow the fruitings to start, but that all happened while we're away. So we just work with what we've got. So as you can see down low, there is no leaves. Now we deliberately do this. One, it takes the energy away from growth and focusing on flowering, but two, it helps keep pests away and the black spot fungal infections away, because whenever these leaves hit close to the ground and you water from over top, or the rain comes and trickles down, the next morning you'll wake up and see black spot. So that's kind of the start of it there. So we actually chop that out. So every week we come out and we literally there we go, trim these lower ones off. So indeterminate, you want to do this and cut off all the lower leaves because you want that fruiting focus on the plant. So see how it's kind of naked now. It's only got a few leaves at the ends, which is what you need. They still need leaves to grow to process the follow the system of photosynthesis to produce its own chlorophyll and other nutrients, but that's basically how it goes. So you can see we've got this frame here. I string in a funny pattern. That's just my thing. You don't need to be fancy like that. You can just do string across, or you can use things like pantyhose or netting like this, some bird netting. You can just cut it into strips and use it. The trick is to make sure it is not too tight, so clearly this is not causing any distress to the plant. There's big space there, so it can continue to grow as thick as it wants, even though tomatoes don't grow that fat on the stalks. But yeah, so that's one way of doing it. So yeah, you just go through each week and trim off the lower ones, but also, if I can see it, I'll see if I can zoom in. Here, where is it? There it is. See this little side shoot here? we like to pinch those off. So along with pruning every week, we go through the sides of all the shoots. So in the angles of all those main leaves that we've pulled out or cut off today, there's usually side shoots in them, and you pinch them out. So by doing that, you actually stop the plant from bushing out, because that's just another new branch that you're adding to the plant. I'll see if I can show you on another one so you can see it a bit better. Here we are. So see here, might be easier there. So in the join there it is. That's what you want to be pinching out. So by pinching that out, it stops it from bushing out. So these guys, if you want some extra plants that are for free, you can actually plant them in some soil or put them in a little glass of water. And that'll actually end up turning into a new tomato plant. So there you go. Tip on free plants of tomatoes if you like. So that's what we do every week. If you leave it for 1 or 2 weeks, or if you leave it for 2 weeks, you'll find that you'll have a lot of them, and then they start getting really thick and making new branches. So if that happens, you can still cut them out, but you're having a wider space to cut, which allows more space for bacteria and germs to get in, which can cause more problems for the plant. So it is best to do that when it's young. So that's for indeterminate tomatoes. So you do that. So and then whenever you do a trim back, like we did on the other one, you just string up if it needs extra support. And keep going until it's reached its height. So you just got to keep on top of it every week. But yes, I'll show you the greenhouse on how to string up the tomatoes. All right, I'm gonna get up. Let's head over. So we're in the greenhouse. I've got some experimental tomatoes over here, which are going okay. They're sort of fizzling out up the top there. But this one here, which is what I wanted to show you, we tend to do this in most of our tomatoes, and it's just the stringing method instead of using stakes. One, it's cost effective, and two, the tomatoes actually seem to enjoy it a bit more. So all it is, if we go down, I'll just change that. See how it is stringing around? So you start it when it's very young, and then every time it grows a little bit more, you just use your string, twist the plant around, and you've added another loop. So it doesn't knot it or anything, just gives it extra support. And there you go. And it'll keep growing, and you just twist it again and again. So this tomato could use a bit of a tidy up. So we'll go ahead and do that. So this is from overhead watering. So while we were away, we had the sprinkler system on in here, which we don't generally do, but it's for when we're away. It's from overhead watering. So tomatoes hate overhead watering. So we just keep trimming up. You can be harsh. And the idea is to cut on an angle so the water doesn't drip into the stalk. You want it to go on that inner angle so it just drops over. Just make sure you get rid of your leaf litter. And that's that. So you just, they're pretty easy to look after. So that's your indeterminate tomatoes on how to care for those ones. We'll go over to some Romas which I've got in here, which we're also trialing. So as you can see, we've got our companion planting with these giant marigolds, And these are beautiful Roma tomatoes, which are determinants, so meaning they only grow to a very short height, usually around 1 meter or just over 1 meter, and they're much more of a bushing variety. So as you can see under here, there's no leaves on the lower layers. I've actually pulled them off, and same with these. I still pinch out just on the lower bottom parts, the little side shoots, and that's the same reason as the others. It's about keeping disease away and stopping pests from coming up so easily. And yeah, so they kind of don't need a lot of maintenance other than just making sure as they get a bit bigger to trim the bottom leaves off only to about 20 or 30 centimeters high, and then just let it do its thing. This is why we like growing these sorts of tomatoes. So yeah, much more lower maintenance. They generally don't need a lot of support. In the greenhouse, they definitely don't need any support. But out in a main garden where the wind is coming through, usually you would just put a little bamboo stake in just for support. You might just do 1 or 2 ties on it just to hold it upright if it gets really windy. But other than that, you don't need to do too much for them. Other tips I can give to you about caring for tomatoes is they love potash. Potash encourages fruiting and flowering, which is the whole idea why you grow tomatoes. But they really love that. They don't like huge amounts of nitrogen. They do need it, but not a huge amount. If you give them too much nitrogen, they'll just focus all their energy on growing, and they sort of forget about the flowering part until towards the end, when it realizes, oh, I haven't produced fruit yet, and it's nearly ready to die. So it's about keeping a bit of a fine balance on that. So using things like sea salt or Charlie Carp is enough, but then you'd need to do a potash solution. I've done a video a little while ago about using the fire ash direct, but I might do one on how to make the liquid version that's completely homemade. So because the tomatoes seem to respond really well to it, it doesn't only just help with the fruiting and the flowering, it sort of gives it an extra boost and keeps them extra happy. But like all plants, the trick is actually in the soil and making sure they've got enough microbes and it's nice and healthy and living. That always goes a long way, and then that way you're not having to give too much to the tomatoes in the long run. If you liked today's video and you got something out of it, please like our video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'd love for you to pop any questions or comments below about today's video. We thank you for your time, and we'll see you next video. Bye.